October is about to come to the close as the Bison improved to 6-2 and 3-2 in conference play after a 38-6 win over Murray State. First time meeting between North Dakota State and Murray State. The Bison once again opted to receive the ball to start the game. We're starting to see that as a trend. It's now the second week in a row, and man, did they get off to a fast start, putting up 21 points in that first quarter.
Coach Matt Entz wouldn't tip his hand that that's what they're going to do moving forward, but 21 points, less than 12 minutes in the game. Part of that was created by a Logan Kopp interception for a short field, but again, Cam Miller was sharp throwing the ball early in the game. It's a trend we've seen in the last couple games again. I mean, you could say maybe that's because NDSU's played Western Illinois and Murray State, but you still have to throw the ball effectively, and he was on target, maybe one errant throw or two, but and NDSU set the tone, and I don't know, maybe that's what we see moving forward, NDSU taking the ball, and Cam Miller says he loves it, so maybe that's something NDSU can, maybe something they found here midseason to get going.
Well, I feel like every game there's always one receiver that we see consistently getting the ball. Today, that was Braylon Henderson finally finding the end zone. Kolpack.
Yeah, how about that? First time since spring of 2021, that spring season when he had a couple touchdowns, a punt return against Sam Houston. He kept at it, and Matt Entz said after the game he's gone through some frustrations, some ups and downs, but he kept at it, and good for him. I mean, that getting involved, I know there's like 6, 7, 8 guys, and it's hard to find your niche or your time, but and he dropped that season-opening touchdown pass, but stayed with it, and he was a difference today.
28-3 at the end of the first half. Third quarter was a little bit of a tough one for the Bison. Lots of adversity. Sam Young gets a targeting call. Will Mostert goes down with a left ankle injury, did not return to play. Same with Marcus Shepard with a left shoulder. How much does that affect the Bison moving forward, McFeely?
Yeah, I mean, we saw early on Jaquise Alexander played third cornerback. The Bison were in the nickel package, I think, for maybe the first time this year that we saw a third cornerback consistently on the field. But then later on, they started losing key defensive players, and so we started to see the Ryan Jones on the field more. And he's been on the field with the injury to Cole Wisniewski recently. We saw Jaquise back out there consistently at corner when Marcus Shepard went out. This is a Bison defense that has not been consistent, shall we say, for a lot of the season. We kind of saw them get rolled up in Grand Forks. We saw South Dakota run through them and handle them physically in a loss at home. And so they really don't have a lot of room for error, I guess, on this defense. They already have some issues. And to see a guy like Will Mostert go down, Marcus Shepard go down, although after the game Matt Entz said that he will probably be okay. You just can't lose anybody. They have their guys out there. They have their Sam Youngs out there, but the players beneath them really haven't proven themselves yet, but they're going to have to prove themselves quickly. A very tough environment against a very good offense next week down in Brookings.
Well, I mean, into the cauldron, Julian Wodarczyk didn't play again today. As it stands now, Sam Young, because of that targeting penalty, is going to miss the first half of that game. But Matt Entz also brought up Jalen Crumby, Jalen Duffy. We saw Najee Nelson last week.
3 true freshmen.
So they're going to have to grow up fast in the secondary. And I'm not saying those guys are going to play a bunch, but I think NDSU is getting to the point with some of the injuries potentially, and the Sam Young sitting in the first half, you're going to have to see a lot of young guys at least take some meaningful steps next week.
Before we dive into November, what was your biggest takeaway from today's win?
Well, a good first half by the offense, and the second half was just, people were leaving left and right.
My goodness.
I can't blame them.
The second half, it was low energy.
Yeah.
Just the dome, everything was low energy the second half.
It was strange because NDSU forces the punt return, all of a sudden it's 35-3. Then NDSU still had their first team offense in there. They looked like they had a drive going, and Zach Mathis gets a punch starter on midfield. And just after that, it was just a bunch of not much going on for the NDSU offense.
But what I take away to answer your question is I'll put these last 2 games. They did what they had to do to put UND behind them, and that debacle, and especially defensively. Murray State did get a touchdown. Say what you want, they scored 24 against Missouri State last week. They've done some things in the Valley. They beat Indiana State, and so I think NDSU did what it had to do. Now it's kind of back into the varsity level of competition.
Yeah, I mean, getting into November now, you kind of wish if you're NDSU that you could have just had no injuries today, that you got through a game like this with no injuries. They had them. They're going to have to deal with them. But now you start at South Dakota State next week. Then you play Southern Illinois at home. Then you end the regular season at Northern Iowa. Craig Bowl used to say what?
Remember November.
Remember November. One way or the other, Bison are going to remember this next month coming up, because it's either going to be something to remember positively with at least a couple of victories, or there's a possibility they could go 0-3 if things go sideways. So you could be anywhere from 9-2 to 6-5. You could be anywhere from a seed to out of the playoffs. You just don't know what's going to happen. Most likely, is it going to be a 7-4 type of thing where they maybe win one of the last three? Probably. Then do they make the playoffs? We don't know, but it's going to be no matter what, it's going to be interesting in the last month of the season.
I personally think if NDSU wants to not sweat it out, they have to win 2 of these last 3. If they go 1-2, finish 7-4, there's going to be a lot of teams at 7-4, especially in the Valley. They have the loss.
And to get the wrong head-to-head.
They've lost to South Dakota, so if that's a 7-4 team they're up against, they lose the head-to-head. They've lost to UND. That's another head-to-head. Then either losing to Northern Iowa or Southern Illinois. That could be another.
Indiana State could have done NDSU a huge solid today. If Indiana State could have held on up in Grand Forks and won that game, that likely would have bumped UND from the playoffs and taken away a competitor for a playoff spot, one of the at-larges. UND came back and won and still has the head-to-head on NDSU. So I think Eric's right. I think to be solid in making the playoffs, NDSU is going to have to go 8-3 to know they're in. 7-4 is going to be a coin flip, and we'll have to see where it goes from there.
Okay, so we heard from them too. You want to get your 2 cents in?
Well, that's my 2 cents. I mean, I can't really add to what Mike said and Eric, other than 7-4, you're sweating a little bit, 8-3, you're in.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see how November plays out. But the Bison get the job done here in Fargo with a 38-6 win over Murray State. For Jeff Kolpack, Eric Peterson, and Mike McFeely, I'm Logan Campbell. Thank you so much for watching the Bison postgame show presented by Gate City Bank.